Hello everyone, welcome back to the latest lecture session, and this will also be the last session. I request you to pay attention to some of the aspects because they are generally important, and also some of the aspects will certainly be in your exam, right. So, two-pronged approach here to get your attention here. So, we were talking about solid waste management, so let us dig right in. So, solid waste management, typically we do not segregate it. So, people, if we can get the money to take care of our waste, again you are going to have relevant issues. So, manual sorting station, one typical one, this is not the norm, usually impossible to get such amounts in a country like India, where I guess we have much more pressing needs elsewhere. So, I will just mention that depending on the level of mixed waste or unsegregated waste coming in, it is almost, if not say impossible, very difficult to get it done, and people will typically not be willing to do that. The conditions of working too are not going to be fine, but this is what a typical manual sorting station will look like, right. And at the end of the day, what is it that they are doing? Plastic waste, bags. So, this will go to a recycler typically, so they are again going to sort it out. So, why I am presenting this information is, this is something each of us can do at our end, as in the home we can typically segregate it, and then it is easy to take it out. For example, if I segregate it into just two fractions, one the organic, one the inorganics, let us say, that is enough. It is easy for the people to take care of the waste. This we are going to look at biological treatment, this recycle and get relevant fuel or money back, let us say, right. Again, if you have a manual sorting station and then what do we say, the relevant infrastructure, obviously you have to send your recyclables out for recycle. So, these are some of the relevant pictures from there. I think we saw this picture elsewhere in one of our earliest videos where the plastic was compressed. I guess you want to have lesser volume before being sent out to the relevant recycler, right. That is what we see here. So, I will skip this, or I guess one aspect. So, it is economically infeasible for most of the urban local bodies. And who funds the ULBs, as in why is it that I care now, right? Why do I need to be concerned about it? Because it is you who will end up paying for not sorting your waste, right. So, that is the aspect. It is not as if some unknown guy is going to swoop in and take care of our waste, right. Now, it is a humongous problem, laws have been passed, the pushback will come, but already it is an issue, and more importantly it is going to, what do we say, bite your own pocket. For example, I think 40% of the budget, or what was it, that goes into maintaining the solid waste related aspects and paying the relevant people and such. Again, but if we can make a resource out of it and gain money from it, that is going to be a win-win, maybe more money for our roads, for water pipes and so on and so forth, right. So, we create a problem, as I mentioned, by mixing the waste, and then we have to pay to clear the mess we create. That is something I wanted to mention. So, the law 2016 hazardous solid waste management rules proposes two ways. One is biomethanation, which is anaerobic digestion based, and the other one is composting based. So, we will look at what these two are and why they are relevant to us, let us say, right. Again, it is anaerobic. I will look at just the principle, you do not need to mug up these aspects. So, here we are talking about anaerobic digestion. Anaerobic meaning no oxygen, right. There is no oxygen in the relevant system. So, at the end of the day, what is it that I will get from my anaerobic digestion? This is what we will have methane, consumer methane, but again this breakdown depends upon how efficiently you are, what do we say, running the anaerobic digester, and also the compounds that are going into your particular plant. So, let us look at that later. So, the issue here that I wanted to point out is that this is a source of energy. For example, in Infosys, what are they doing? They are compressing the gas and using it in the messes. So, even in IIT Roorkee, that is the plan that I want to implement, and that is what we are working on here. So, hopefully in a year or so we will be able to achieve it. We are going to collect our waste, have an anaerobic digester, the details of which we are going to look at, and then this gas, which has certain calorific value or energy ingrained in it, will either be used to provide the energy for your messes, right, or we are going to burn it, gain electricity from it, and then connect it to the grid. So, one of these two things is going to happen. So, let us move on. What is the relevant process here? So, this is what my waste typically looks like. I have source of carbohydrates, proteins and lipids. This is in terms of COD if I am not wrong, or oxygen demand. So, this is from Metcalfe and Eddy, the book here. So, first step, hydrolysis, right, where relatively simpler compounds are formed here. Typically, it is the actions of the enzymes secreted by some of the microbes involved in the later process, and this is typically a slow process, right. But again, as you can see here if the waste is not segregated, nothing is going to happen, all this process is going to fail. So, that is something to keep in mind. Here we have hydrolysis, and then we have two stages, either acidogenesis, fermentation, and acetogenesis. So, here the key aspect is sometimes we can write as if both are the same, but it is not. We will have acidogenesis and also acetogenesis. So, here we have production of acetic acid, and I guess depending upon the process too, you will have intermediate volatile fatty acids, which again will go to acetic acids. Depending upon the type of compound, you will also have hydrogen being formed, and hydrogen is critical here. Why is hydrogen critical here? Because the hydrogen that is produced here will be required for the methanogenesis or the methanogens, the microbes that will lead to formation of methane. So, without hydrogen this can't be formed, and if I do not maintain the plant well, right, what is going to happen? Let us see. Typically methanogens slow growing, kinetics is slow, but this process typically faster. So, what can happen if hydrogen starts accumulating here in this particular system is that the process here, this process which was thermodynamically feasible will become infeasible, right, and then your particular acetogenesis or acidogenesis will not be feasible. So, that is one aspect, as in we have to finally balance the needs of methanogens with those of acetogenesis or the microbes leading to acetogenesis. So, one aspect, hydrolysis, simpler compounds, and then formation of acetic acid via acidogenesis and acetogenesis, and then methane formation, right. Let us move on. So, general reaction, I am just summarizing a series of reactions. So, if it is glucose, I guess relatively simpler already. So, we are going to have acetic acid being formed, acetogenesis, some hydrogen and carbon dioxide, and then as you can see acetic acid going to CH4 and carbon dioxide, and some of the carbon dioxide again will be used by the hydrogen here, and you will have methane production here, right. So, you can see the balance here if hydrogen is piling up because methanogens were not being looked after. So, this reaction which was feasible in the forward direction will become infeasible, right. That is one thing to, or some aspects to keep in mind. And also if methanogens we affect them, right, they are prima donnas, I guess, right, they need to be handled remarkably well. So, you have these guys with six packs, right, who are only concerned about themselves, nothing else. If you are in need, they will never come to aid you. Anyway, enough of digressing there. So, similarly here they want to be looked after a lot, right, they do not really care about what do we say, the environment much. So, they are the prima donnas here. So, if the acetic acid piles up or the carbon dioxide concentration increases, what is going to happen? The pH is going to decrease, and again the prima donnas, they need to be maintained very well. If the pH is less than 6.5, they start being affected, right. So, these aspects also have to be looked at. This is called soaring of the anaerobic digester. Why am I mentioning this? Because now the government says there are two ways to get your solid waste done if your campus or any institution has an area greater than 500 meters square or so on and so forth. Certainly IIT Roorkee falls in that category, and we have to do that. Most of the group housing projects in NCR or Bangalore and such, they also fall in that category. So, all these people will have to start doing that. So, when you evaluate the options, you can look at which option is it that you think is feasible depending upon the amount available to you, and then what you expect down the line. Because this anaerobic digester, though it costs a bit, I guess, for example 50 to 60 lakhs for installation for 16,000 students or population of IIT Roorkee, but maintenance has to be technical, but cost maintenance, I mean inputs are relatively less. Why? Well, we do not really do much there, right. So, that is one aspect to keep in mind. Let me move on. So, this is what a typical anaerobic digester looks like from the top. This is the one. So, from the side view, this is what it looks like. So, sludge is coming in. So, if it is solid waste, I can mix it or make a slurry, grind it and make a slurry, and then I am going to put it in. And for removing the gas, carbon dioxide and or methane, I can collect it out here, as you can see, gas line and gas out, and some of the sludge, right. This is remarkably good for what do we say, agriculture or such. Let us say this can be used for agriculture or gardening and such, right. So, that is one aspect to keep in mind. Let us move on. So, other aspect that was mentioned by the government was composting. Composting is an aerobic process in general. So, let us just look at an overview of conventional and vermicomposting. As mentioned, it is aerobic stabilization. When I am talking about stabilization, what is it that I am talking about? I want to see to it that the material, at least here it is kitchen waste, does not have biodegradable organic matter after the end of my process. Why not? If I leave it out onto the streets, so I am going to have vectors, flies, and then relevant issues with respect to disease transmission and so on and so forth. So, that is what we are trying to do, either in the anaerobic or aerobic process. We are trying to stabilize our waste, right. So, again sorting, so you have mixture of waste. So, what is it that I am trying to do? This is the end product that it will look like. So, again it is biological transformation. So, I will not look into this in detail here. So, phases of composting, this is a key aspect. Why? You will have to maintain the right temperature. Temperature is necessary because of two aspects. One, to kill the pathogens. Pathogens can't survive the relevant high temperatures, and also because of the kind of microbes that are necessary for the relevant processes that are occurring, right. So, initially explosive growth, right, and also the readily soluble and readily usable or assimilable sugars and such will be used up, and then you are going to have breakdown of compounds which are relatively difficult to degrade, meaning proteins, fats, and I guess cellulose. So, for that you are going to have a thermophilic phase, and then again a mesophilic phase which is relatively longer, right. So, this is one aspect, again relatively difficult to degrade these compounds. So, right temperature conditions are a key necessity when we are thinking of composting. For example, people try to do that in home, and if they do not try to maintain either oxygen content from, if not every day, regular, it is not necessary that you do it regularly, either oxygen content or the temperature as we saw, and what else is required? We need water or moisture content. Why is moisture content required? Because microbes like humans also need moisture, but if I put in too much moisture, oxygen, it will find it difficult to go through the pile. So, these are some of the aspects you need to be aware of, and more importantly, the carbon to nitrogen ratio is key. For example, if I keep eating rice every day, just a lot of carbohydrates without a source of nitrogen, let us say proteins or such, my body is going to start wither away or is not going to function as, or can't function to meet the objectives, let us say, right, at least physically. And here too, microbes, they have their own needs. So, carbon to nitrogen ratio is what most people mess up when they are trying to compost waste, pardon me. So, you now are knowledgeable. So, if you are trying to do it in home or trying to what do we say, provide assistance to your local urban body, so you will have to look at these aspects. These are the usual culprits when composting might fail. So, what is it about? It is the speeding up of decay of organic matter, right. We are doing it in a more what do we say, engineered manner, right. We are trying to help the nature. As I mentioned earlier, water content, right, carbon to nitrogen, oxygen, temperature, and also optimum size, as in too big a size, then microbes are going to have difficulty going through, right, surface area is less. Too small a size, then I guess air can't pass through and you are going to have such issues. These are the main aspects to keep in mind, right. So, let me move on. So, you can have different types of composting and different types of aerators. This is a mixing cum aerator out here. So, you can have it within your particular what do we say, confined area too, but here the issue is land. In India, let us say Delhi, Bangalore, where you have more people and where there is a need for managing solid waste. Do you think land prices are cheap? Not really. So, this is where it turns out to be an issue. In India, though, this is what it typically looks like. These are the crude what do we say, mixers cum aerators. So, you see this pile, this is called Windrow composting, these piles. So, maybe once a week or once every 3 days you are going to have mixing of this particular pile, so that what do we say, the oxygen is available for the microbes, right. So, this is what we have, and again as you can see a lot of area is going to be required or considerable area. Vermicomposting typically done in what do we say, in your backyard or in your kitchens. So, you are going to use worms, these are not earthworms, you will have to get them. Typically in most cities you are going to have them, these are going to aid the process, let us say, right. So, how do I dispose it? Let us say open dumping, this is what we are typically trying to do or now avoid, or we are doing and want to avoid. Ideally, it has to go to a landfill, as in all this plastic waste which is ending up on my roads, creating pollution, choking my wastewater drains and again affecting life out there, they typically have to go into a landfill. But as mentioned, if both the organic matter which is relatively biodegradable and the inert matter which is non-biodegradable, both of them end up in my landfill, then obviously I am going to have issues. So, I guess I need to correct myself slightly here. So, landfilling, typically I do not want to send these inert waste which have high calorific value to the landfill, I will typically send them for recycle. What will go to the landfill is my organic waste typically, but there are better ways, as you see we can go for biomethanation or the aerobic composting, so that we can use the final product as manure. So, that is one aspect to keep in mind, as in landfills if I send plastic waste considerable volume and organic content. So, this will take a lot of time to degrade, or the mixture plastic will not degrade, organics again, biomethanation it will be remarkably slow. So, what we are trying to do with biomethanation or aerobic composting is fasten the process, let us say, right. Sometimes we are throwing it into the sea and feeding it to pigs and hogs, right. And landfill though, what is it? And this is one particular location we plan to what do we say, visit, at least a hazardous waste landfill, and the other way or kind of landfill is the municipal solid waste landfill. We will briefly look at these two aspects and see why they are necessary for what do we say us or clusters of humans, let us say. When we talk about solid waste, we are typically talking about municipal solid waste. So, as I just mentioned, we have other wastes also which are hazardous waste. Let us say from your labs you are going to generate solvents which are carcinogenic, you can't throw them out into the drain, right. So, we have to collect them and then what do we say, either incinerate them, or if you are having heavy metals in your labs, for example, we have cyanide baths in the metallurgy department, you can't throw out that waste, especially depending upon the final product and the concentration. So, that has to go to a secured landfill. So, landfills, hazardous waste and municipal solid waste landfills. This we are doing miserably. With respect to hazardous waste, we are doing relatively okay, not great though. So, let us see what we have. Okay, let me draw the figure out here. So, when we are talking about landfill, what is it that I am talking about? So, I am going to have my waste out here that is piled up over time. So, anaerobic conditions are going to predominate. In the anaerobic conditions, you would have seen that acetogenesis, acetic acid is formed, right. And if I have any heavy metals or such, let us say from my electronic goods or due to mixed waste being dumping, this acetic acid can lead to leaching or dissolution of the heavy metals, right. And now what is going to happen now? My heavy metal can now, which was earlier in the solid phase, will now become soluble and turn into the aqueous phase, let us see. And then that can go to my groundwater and pollute my groundwater, let us see. So, this is my groundwater coming in, this can pollute my groundwater. So, I want to avoid this. So, what is it that we do? We have a primary leachate collection system. So, the key aspect of municipal solid waste or hazardous waste landfill is the leachate that will be generated is going to be tapped or prevented from going down to the ground surface, or not ground surface, to the groundwater and leading to further pollution. So, in this you have, if it is municipal solid waste, you will have one leachate or leachate collection system, leachate collection system. If it is hazardous waste, because of the risk, it is mandated to have two leachate collection systems, let us say, right. So, what is it typically that we have here? Typically, you are going to have a liner, a HDPE liner, okay. HDPE liner, the picture of which we just looked at, and we will come back to that, right. And above this you will have some sand, okay, and then perforated pipes, and then gravel, Okay, how should I draw the gravel? Okay, gravel or such. So, and on top of this will come my waste. So, whatever leachate is generated will go into this perforated pipe and will be collected centrally or such and will be treated according to the needs. And then beneath this you will have compacted clay, which will decrease the permeability. Compacted clay, right, that is going to decrease your permeability, isn't it? So, in general these are the bare minimum aspects. If it was for hazardous waste, the same thing that we had here, right, primary leachate collection system, you are also going to have secondary leachate collection system, right, same thing as in more or less you are going to have the HDPE with the perforated pipes here and then the compacted clay and such. So, the second layer, which is the secondary leachate collection system, will act as a leak indicator, right, that is necessary for the hazardous waste though. So, this HDPE liner and such, what does it look like? So, this is what it looks like. So, you have compacted clay, this slopes out here and then they are laying the liners out here, right. So, a plan view, top view, this is what it looks like. Again, a typical overview though, right. So, one aspect I guess is leachate treatment facility, as in the leachate that is collected will come out here, and if it is hazardous waste, either incineration and then looking at air pollution or such has to be looked at, and if it is organic or municipal solid waste landfill, you are going to have methane being formed, considerable methane, and you have to take care of that methane, either use it or you have to flare it out, you do not want that to pile up, right. So, that is one aspect to keep in mind, right. And supposedly we are supposed to go in cells, but rarely is that done. People do that in a, what do we say, non-scientific manner, as in here you have one cell and then once it is done you cover it with a thin layer of soil and then another cell and so on. But again in India we are yet to go there. So, this is what I guess rudimentary landfill section looks like for a municipal solid waste. The leachate collection system which I talked about earlier, the liner to prevent, what do we say, your leachate from going through, and even if it goes through you will have a compacted clay liner for which the permeability is going to be so less that it is more or less diffusion that is going to be the primary mode of transfer or mass transfer of the contaminants there. So, that is one aspect, and then leachate treatment and methane gas recovery or flaring, right. So, these are the aspects to keep in mind. So, dump truck, I guess this is what I guess landfill operation. So, this is a poorly constructed landfill, if I may say so, right, and at the end of the day this is what you want to look it like, as in you are going to cap it and then you are going to cover the landfill, but again note that underneath you are still going to have a lot of organic waste that is decomposing or will take time to decompose anaerobically. So, biological reactions in landfills are going to be the same as what we discussed earlier, landfill anaerobic, right. And as you saw earlier, we had the case of biomethanation plant, 4 stages, hydrolysis. I mean in landfill you might say aerobic phase because it is open to the gaseous phase, but all the regions beneath will typically have only anaerobic phases. Their hydrolysis, acetogenesis and then methanogenesis, I guess, right, typical stages. And at home, what is it that you can do? For example, if quite a few people ask me about this, so I asked a PhD student of a colleague to prepare a couple of slides. So, we need to thank Kenyam Bagra, a PhD student in the environmental engineering group. Let us see what she has. First, we are going to have to segregate it, right, wet waste and dry waste, or biodegradable and non-biodegradable. These we will get relatively rarely from the homes, let us say, right. And then I guess you can classify it. So, ideally you will have to classify it into these 7 categories, but I think Indians are as yet what do we say, yet to capture that or take it to heart. So, at least we can push for segregation into 2 categories. For the more, what do we say, not entertaining, enterprising people, you can look at these aspects. And now it is becoming a, what do we say, profitable business to be able to sell the recycled waste. For example, this you can't do anything about it. Biomedical waste is required by law to be disposed accordingly, but e-waste, right, as in my cell phones, wires and such, metals, cardboards and plastics, people are making considerable money based on how they are able to set up their logistical chains, as in collection and then being sent to the recycle center. So, that is where some of you entrepreneurs can look at it. So, I guess here we have a suggestion for 3 types of bins: organic, recyclable and non-recyclable. But again, non-recyclable difficult to look at it. So, even and this mass will be less, as in sanitary napkins, diapers and such, right. But again, this is the ideal case. At a minimum we can have organic, recyclable and non-recyclables. And in IIT Roorkee we started setting this up, as in e-waste is now being collected and you will be paid if you want to throw away your phone, not throw away, dispose your phone. A e-waste company will come and pick up your waste from time to time, right. And already cardboards, newspapers and such are being collected. And if you want to look at the organic waste at your home, you have 2 ways: indoor composting, where we have it in bins; aerobic method, which can be fastened by having vermicomposting, but the worms have to be maintained in the sense that temperature has to be maintained; or backyard composting, if you have space, open piles by digging a pit, let us say, right. With respect to vermicomposting, just one aspect: these are types of is a process where types of earthworms, these are not the usual earthworms, they fasten the process of decomposing the organic matter, right. And as can be seen, there are different types of earthworms, let us say, and again you can get them from the usual market if you look at it. So, this is what it looks like, but in general temperature has to be maintained. If it gets too cold or too, what do we say, much water, they come out, and then you are going to have what do we say, birds and such, getting at your relevant aspects. So, here they are covering it up, and for oxygen they have the relevant holes. If you want to look up how to go about it in detail, you can look this up, US EPA, either composting or vermicomposting. You will get pretty good, easy to do details, let us say 2-3 hours of work, as in getting the right container, maintaining the right conditions, and you are done, right. So, composting, again similar to the aerobic composting, depends upon the carbon to nitrogen ratio and also water. So, the earlier case we were looking at kitchen waste and sending it to the municipality and what they can do, right, or what IIT Roorkee can do. Here if you are trying to do it at your home too, you need to be aware of these aspects, as in you are going to have a mixture of carbon to nitrogen. So, source of carbon, if you can't what do we say, remember it, it is brown, they are called brown sources, I guess. So, dead leaves, branches, twigs, cardboards and newspapers, brown, right. And then green, meaning literally grass that was literally cut recently, or kitchen waste. So, you have to have an ideal mixture of these two. If not, your carbon to nitrogen ratio will not be maintained and you will not have the relevant decomposition, right. So, again heat and moisture content and these aspects. Another aspect is, depending on the process, your aeration is also going to be important, right. So, some pros and cons, but I will leave this slide here or move on, because I do not want to go into the details, but you can look at it and see if it is feasible for you at your home. So, one aspect to note is that you might have seen when we went to the what is that, rotary drum composter, which was digesting some of the sludge from our STP, sewage treatment plant, you saw a mixed solid waste being dumped there. Why? Because people do not segregate their waste, and now the municipality is pushing IIT Roorkee administration to get it done. So, we are going to have a biomethanation plant maybe in a year or so, but for that, as you saw, we need to take care of the prima donnas, and for that we need to maintain them. And if you have all kinds of waste, who is going to segregate it? Certainly not me. If it comes, it will come from your fee or such, right. So, to get the job done, and also because you are now more enlightened citizens, I request you to segregate your waste. So, the eco group, again people can join that group too, will also try to handhold and change the habits. But now that you are a more enlightened group, I request you to start segregating your waste on campus, or if you can think of ideas to make the process better once you come back on campus, certainly let us know and we will try to get that done, right. So, segregate your waste and keep your city or campus clean, right. And as I mentioned earlier in my course, or our course, pardon me, eco group, it is trying to look at solid waste, and one of the initiatives was about paper, plastic and styrofoam cutlery. What is the problem? This is again from this eco group, the students Praharshan, Devesh and their peers. So, problems and solutions. So, what is it that we have? Looks like we are having a huge amount of disposable cups, and looks like one disposable cup provides or produces 10.5 kgs of waste per year, let us say, right, if I keep dumping it every year. And as mentioned in the course, we know microplastics are an issue, let us say, and during this time we were concerned about COVID-19, but that is not a long term issue. So, here they were trying to get an idea about the relevant data or extent of generation. So, I think they looked at how often do you drink juice or coffee or milk, and they saw that, you know, while some people drink twice, some people once, there are a large fraction which, what do we say, drink multiple times. So, again plates also from styrofoam. So, now they were able to calculate how many cups and plates that are going to be generated per year, and the cost for that particular, what do we say, cutlery or such per day, assuming it is 1 per cutlery. So, they want to look at alternatives, let us say. One is having a separate list with and without cups for drinks, as in you get your own cup, you are going to have to pay lesser, right. So, they were coming up with ideas. Why am I presenting this? Because I would request you to think of ideas to make our places of living better, right. So, another one was having mandatory biodegradable cutlery at the canteens, but again they will have some limitations because cost might be high and also the longevity will be an issue, right. Again they were coming up with different aspects. So, here I will provide these in the slides, so you can look at that, but one aspect to note or keep in mind is that when they presented this data to me, that okay, they will ask the students to get the cups, right. I said okay, go for a survey. They went for a survey, and I guess you see that majority were fine with it and some were not fine with it. But then I said, my dear Devesh or Praharsh or students, again keep in mind I was pessimistic. I said that I think you are underestimating peer pressure. In India, peer pressure is a lot. For example, you know, peer pressure, let us say people have issues with what, dandruff, maintenance of hair, hair fall and so on and so forth. We apply a lot, try to put in a lot of money and such, but I guess the solutions might be closer home, right. You can have solutions that are easier to maintain or such, let us say, right. But typically we are concerned about peer pressure. But here one aspect I was really concerned about with is, if I bring a cup to the canteen, will I be mocked at? Because of me being mocked at, maybe I will not try to do that again. So, that was something that I was concerned with. But now that we have a more enlightened population and we want to start it in the first year canteen, hopefully some of these aspects will take off, but that is something that I wanted to mention here, right. So, if you want to contact the ECHO group, the email is here and they can also be reached via a variety of means. Note that they only started this in 2019, right. So, let us move on. So, before I wind up, everything is about money, right. Everything in the world now runs about money or has always been about it. So, just 3 aspects that I want to summarize. Over the last 3 decades, 5 major companies have spent a lot of money in lobbying or trying to, what do we say, alter or change public perception. So, you can see that they spent $3.6 billion, only 5 though, right. So, that is something to keep in mind, right. So, Exxon Mobil, BP and such. Why is that again, and why, how does it work hand in hand with the major investment groups? Here you see the major investment groups who decide where the money goes, right. And if they decide if the money goes to the oil companies, then the oil companies can flourish. But if under pressure from their stakeholders or shareholders they decide something else, then it will be a different aspect, right. So, here we see that I wanted to mention this because the most funds for fossil fuel industries since the Paris Climate Agreement. Since the Paris Climate Agreement, these I guess were the amount of funds, here it is US dollar billion, that were put up or went to the fossil fuel industries from the major investors. So, why am I presenting this? Again, as you can see, 2016 I think Paris Climate Agreement, 2017, 18, 2019 first few months. So, you see that despite the world maybe hurtling towards disaster, many of these companies or what do we say, investors are still pushing for what do we say, investments into fossil fuels. But now there is a remarkable turnaround, hopefully due to various issues. One of them is always going to be awareness of the common people and then pressure on the stakeholders. If not, nothing is going to change. So, that is something we have been trying to do in this course. I know that a majority of you will be bored, but my dear ladies and gentlemen, this is your life and career and future, right. So, with that I will end by what do we say, summarizing our book Anarchy and also what we learned from that. The last time I think we saw was that, I will just try to link it what we saw earlier, JP Morgan Chase or Chase, let us say, putting in a lot of money into things that are not going to be, what do we say, sustainable, right. So, let us look at that. So, after the last time we saw that Sirajuddaula and so were defeated, and you had Robert Clive landing here. What did he do? Did he immediately inform his company people? No. What he did was, first he told his private secretary, hey my dear, buy all the shares of East India Company. Why? He knew that once this message of the defeat of the local rulers comes or becomes common knowledge, the share price is going to increase. So, his first thought was to buy up a lot of shares, and then he conveyed the message, the price went up. So, what I am trying to mention here is, people, I mean, are motivated mostly by power, what do we say, seduction maybe, and then certainly money, lot of times money, and this is what happened out here, right. And in the meantime, we had, what do we say, different aspects. We had the Tipu Sultanate here, we had the Marathas coming into picture, we had the Nizams coming into picture, but there is probably no other Indian ruler who did more to defeat the British other than the great warrior Tipu Sultan, right. So, I will just mention it in this context. Obviously, this is not going to be in the exam, so you can turn off the what do we say, video if you want to pursue other things, but I wanted to mention this and tie it up to what we are seeing in general, let us say, right. So, you must understand that at 17 years old, at the age of 17 years, right, he would come down from the Carnatic side, go all the way to Madras, almost capture the governor, right, and put fear in the hearts of the British and show to the other Indian rulers that yes, the British can be defeated, but if we have, what do we say, modern training techniques and modern infantry, right, and modern equipment, the emphasis being on being modern or putting in scientific thought. So, he was the first person, I believe, who looked at rockets, and you still see the literature from that in the British museums, let us say, right. They adapted his rocket techniques too. So, again Tipu Sultan here, right, that is something that I wanted to mention, but by the time he was king, let us say, or the emperor as can be seen, the British, due to imaginative diplomacy, they were able to drive a wedge between the Marathas, between Tipu Sultan and the Nizam. Preceding that, realizing that the British were always, breaking their treaties, not holding to their promise, what did they do? The Marathas, Nana Fadnavis, Tipu Sultan or Hyder Ali and the Nizam, they came together, right. And if at that point, right, and when was this, or this was more or less at the time when Hyder Ali and Tipu Sultan at Pullur, right, with their modern infantry and cavalry routed the British. So, there were literally very few to no British, what do we say, fighting force left in South India. It was in disarray. If these three, what do we say, powers which could at that time stand up to the British could come together, and they could have easily pushed them out, as in the British, and then the fate would have been different. What, I do not know, but what I am trying to say is that again interests come into play. The British, either due to Hyder Ali not pushing on his advantage, or due to imaginative diplomacy from the British, they were able to get Nizam onto their side. They were also able to drive a wedge between the different Marathas, right. So, they were trying to use one Peshwa or one, I guess, of the chieftains against the other. So, they were very successful in that. But again, you must understand that at around 1780, the world was in turmoil, right. For example, based on looking at the devastation that these British wrought on the Indian, what do we say, life in Bengal. For example, Mughals used to have granaries, but now the British, once they came into, via East India Company came in, they did not care about it. There were no granaries. When there were famines and they thought that the, what do we say, share price might go down, the British, what do we say, East India Company governors there, or not the governors, the stakeholders wanted more money. So, they put in more taxes and then they bled Indian society. Here the key is a corporate which is unaccountable was having more or less an indirect rule all over Bengal or Uttar Pradesh and such, and then they bled the society to death because they were not accountable to the people, they did not care about the people. And famines, I do not know how many crores of people died, people had to resort to cannibalism, right. So, this is what I guess can happen if left unchecked. And again, sadly though, our people could not come together. Tipu Sultan tried his best, as in he would even ask Napoleon, and Napoleon would land in Egypt, right. He would land in Egypt because he wanted to come to the richer areas of India and what do we say, show the tip of the French sword to the British army. But then there Napoleon's navy was hit badly and he could never carry out that plan. But these are the kinds of what do we say, global plays that were occurring at that time. After this famine here in Bengal and such, one other related aspect was that around 1780 and such, when Tipu Sultan routed the British at Polillur, what happened was that they had this Boston Tea Party. You might have seen that or heard that too. In the Boston harbor, they sank the tea that was coming from East India Company, which was trying to dump it in or sell it for a price in America. Why were they afraid? They thought that whatever this East India Company did in India, right, will also be done in America. And that is how, or that was one of the reasons for the American War of Independence. And you know how the British were then thrown off and then how America, what do we say, became independent. One of the pushes certainly was because they looked at what the British were doing in, what do we say, India, let us say, right. Again, Tipu Sultan would later be killed, and note that even when he was sure, or everybody was sure that he was going to be defeated, right, Nizams and Maratha did not help. Nizam sent the forces, British were able to bring in the forces, right, and he was one ruler, he even to his last breath kept on fighting. And why is it that I mention? I guess people are maligned a lot, but I think we should look at the actions before we judge them. So, when he was asked to surrender, he did not deem it worthy of a response and he died fighting on the ramparts. And then after Tipu Sultan was taken care of, the British trained their energies on the Marathas, divided them, played them against one another, and then we know that the rest is history. Into this kind of world came a little bespectacled man later, but again I guess that is enough of that. So, I hope you learned something from this particular course and hope some of you will come on campus and have a good time, but I hope that all of you have a good time in your careers and have a fulfilling life ahead. Thank you.